Senator Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Werfel, thank you for spending time with me yesterday and your willingness to take on this task. I think based on the discussion today, you have a pretty good sense of what you're getting yourself into. From my standpoint, I think the job of the IRS should be pretty straightforward. It's to administer the tax law and collect the revenue the government requires. Unfortunately, Congress, in creating this tax law, has created this complex mess, which is almost impossible to comply with. I mean, you've seen the studies where you have 10 different tax CPAs that complete a return. None of them get the same answer. That's a very sad reality. I want to focus my question, though, on what I think is going to be a part of the public debate here is going to be that tax gap. Because as commissioner, it will be up to you to really determine how you're going to employ the resources to try and close that tax gap. And again, we all want to see people comply with the tax code. We don't want to see people be tax cheats. But I'm hearing all kinds of different things. I mean, I get a report here that Joint Committee on Taxation said that 78 to 90% of that tax gap really is with taxpayers under $200,000, lost reported revenue. The chairman's talking about it's all with the top 1%, although the top 1% pay more than 40% of the income tax. So I want to get your sense of where is that tax gap really occurring? I mean, what types of taxpayers? How much is due to just complexity of the tax code?
Yeah, well, Senator, I appreciate the question. I think that I start with, you can start with some basic facts, and I think about the fact that most Americans, working families, pay their taxes through their payroll. And then therefore the IRS has 99% of the information it needs to assess a balance due. And then just based on research and studies and what's been publicly reported, the very intricate, complex returns or filings from high-income taxpayers, that's very different. That is not paid through the payroll. There's a whole host of different issues that come up, and I've seen estimates that say as much as 20% of that income is opaque and shielded from IRS view.
So let me just quickly interrupt.
Please.
There's always a big deal made out of these big companies that pay nothing. Big companies oftentimes have IRS agents in their offices, right? Correct?
I'm not sure I follow, Senator.
Well, I mean large companies have massive tax departments. Oftentimes, IRS agents are basically embedded to make sure that they comply. The big companies that pay zero, are just complying with a very complex tax code, correct? And you generally have IRS agents there making sure that they're complying as best they can with the complex tax code, correct?
Senator, I'm not sure. Just because I'm not as familiar with what I understand right now, and I need to learn more if I'm fortunate enough to be confirmed, is that IRS agents or revenue agents, they don't feel they have the capacity or the understanding to unpack the complexity of some of these activities.
If up to 90% of the tax gap is in with misreported income of people making less than $200,000, I mean, are we just going to misspend all kinds of money trying to go after the wrong group of people? Particularly if we're saying, we're not going to touch anybody making under $400,000. I mean, how much of the tax gap is with illegal activity, things like drug trafficking? Again, I'm trying to get a sense of where you really do think the dollars are, and if the dollars aren't, again, there certainly are dollars at the top, but if there's not enough, I mean, are we going to spend more money trying to get money out of the taxpayers that don't represent the huge amount of the tax gap?
Senator, I think I always start with this guiding principle: how do we build trust? So to answer your question, I would say for high-income taxpayers, I think we can build trust across all taxpayers by saying we're going to do a better job understanding their balance due than we do today. Because if you're an honest, hardworking American who's doing your taxes effectively, you should expect large corporations and high-income taxpayers to do the same. For the rest of the tax gap that you're describing, my going-in hypothesis is the way to build trust is to understand what are the highest priority areas to go after. Are there unscrupulous tax preparers that we need to assess? Are there individuals or organizations that are looking to evade taxes, and is there a way we can focus on that versus others that are honest taxpayers? So I don't know yet because I'm not there, but the commitment here is to better unpack the tax gap for you and for the American people, so there's clarity on exactly how this all shapes up on a go-forward basis.
Okay, we need to look at the actual data and go based on the reality situation rather than just rhetoric.
I agree. Evidence-based is critical.
The fact is, for most Americans, the government has the relevant information that they need to complete a tax return. These are the firefighters and the nurses and the teachers that my wife always says, I hear this so many times I wake up in the middle of the night. My husband's talking about firefighters, teachers, nurses, and 2 tax codes. But the government has the information. And what's wrong with the idea if someone in Oregon or any of our states says, I would like the government, and this would be purely voluntary, let me underline it, purely voluntary. And if all the big tax prep firms try to say it would be a mandate, I want them to hear purely voluntary. But if a person says, I'd like the government to take the information it has, kind of give me a draft return, I'll make any changes and send it back. What is wrong with having a voluntary approach like that? Your thoughts?
Well, I would go back to the question of what are the authorities the IRS has? Is this something that would have to be implemented in law, or can it be administered without a law? If it needs to be implemented by law, then my opinion on this as a potential commissioner, Mr. Chairman, would be, can we do it? What are the gaps that we have with our technology?
What do you make of the fact that so much of the rest of the world does it? We're all wondering, oh my goodness, it's so complicated. Much of the rest of the world looks at us and says, hey folks, how can it be that you can't figure this out? And I'm not talking about the administration of it. You're making very valid points. But having heard how senators feel about the nature of a voluntary program, I assume you don't have problems with voluntary programs in this area.
I don't. And in fact, first of all, you mentioned other, whether it's states or nations. I'm a big fan of benchmarking. I want to understand what other tax administrators are doing, where they're having success with customer service and their experiences. And I think that's going to be part of a go-forward plan. Your point around, is this a solution that can really unlock a lot of benefits for taxpayer service? We should be looking at it. I just put it to tax policy and this committee to decide whether the wisdom of that, if it requires a legal change, and my seat at the table.
Well, as you know, we already put language in to the legislation. I and several colleagues have been interested in it, so you're going to do it. I just want somebody to have their heart in it.
Yes.
That's why I'm asking you.
Yes. I'm very interested in it.
Constantly stunned when I have town meetings. I made this commitment to have town meetings, every county, every year, 1,030. When I bring this up, people look at me, yeah, what's holding it up? And it's hard to explain it. So you got a lot on your plate.